by the military-industrial complex.
I'm just a patsy.
But I have a dream.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAP.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks.
And we're back. How you doing, George?
Hey, Peter, I have a dream. I heard Martin Luther King say this. You ever see those movies where it goes clickety click click? You know, somebody's typing and it types what they're typing.
Yep.
Across the thing. And I just want two. Matt Pottinger from Virginia Benassi. There's a leak here in Wuhan. There's a leak here in Wuhan. There's a leak here in Wuhan. You know, that's all I want is just one.
Well, we'll work on that, George.
I mean, 5 seconds.
Okay. We'll work on that. And I think it was Dave Underdown who had some interesting historical Pottinger moment this morning. I need to go find it.
Well, Dave always does, but he's a expert on the East India, British East India Company, which has an American flag, which kind of is unsettling. But Henry Pottinger was, of course, the first guy to go up the Yangtze. Matt, you weren't the first guy to go up the Yangtze to create a pandemic. No, the first guy to go up the Yangtze was a guy named Henry Pottinger, the first overlord of China in Hong Kong. And then he raped Shanghai. And then they went as far as Nanking and raped Nanking was the first rape of Nanking, not the second in World War II. And he established the rule of fair game, which means you can just strip everything, you can steal everything, spoils of war. And that's Henry Pottinger. He's also your first drug lord. He's also your first drug lord in China.
So this is before World War II. You're talking about the Opium War.
First Opium War.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, get those junky junks out of my way. I'm coming in and you're going to be sniffing and smoking some opium.
Right.
Because we have a trade deficit and you getting our silver for your porcelain ain't going to happen much more. We're coming in. And that's the story of the first Opium War and the second one.
And there are some people who contend that the reason that China is flooding the West with drugs right now is because they're trying to it's payback.
Well, maybe the Harding Matheson Bank, Connie's asking, who did he work for? He worked for the British royal family who had significant interests in the British East India Company. He was Sir Henry Pottinger, he was a lord. And his son did the same kind of number on Australia. I can't remember his son's name, but he did a similar thing and he didn't last as long. He only lasted until he was 34. But then the nephew also has a similar story in Afghanistan. You can't believe it. It's drugs everywhere. And I'm not saying they're related to Stan Pottinger.
Well, that would be the next step, right? To see if there's a connection. Oh, you got the book.
Yeah, I read the book.
You read the whole book?
I read the whole book.
Oh, well, you're ahead of Carrie and me. Carrie had to laugh out loud when we got to the chapter where the heroine is naked for the entire chapter.
The heroine, female hero. Yes.
Yeah, the female hero. Yeah, it was slightly salacious. the writing style.
Well, I'm going to leave out the salacious parts, but yes,
Yeah.
the FBI agent in the story does get tortured by this evil Nazi, who's the last Nazi, a lot like the Eric Traub story. Sorry, I'm a little bouncy today. I should calm down. I've had some tea.
Deep breaths.
But
There we
you know what this book's about? This book's about a coronavirus that adds a docking protein like GP47 to go from a regular infectious flu to a really bad syncytial hemorrhagic fever flu where you bleed through your eyeballs. Sound familiar? Where they try to aerosolize it and they try to increase the incubation period of the virus? Sound familiar? Guess what year he puts this out, Stan Pottinger? 2003, 2004, the same year his son, in that same Hardin Matheson Hotel in Hong Kong, the drug lord hotel, the Mandarin, he just happens to be right there when SARS breaks out. SARS, huh? Just interesting. He's one floor above, and what do they say? How do they say it spread down to start the guy to patient zero? Through the traps, through the drain traps. So it would have had to have come from somebody from above. Oh my.
You know, you can't make this up, George. Like that's the whole thing. It's like I know that I repeat myself, but like if you put that in a script in a Hollywood movie, this is why the movie didn't get made, right? The reason The Last Nazi never got made into a movie is because the studios were going, nobody would believe that.
That's why I say they just did it. They just did it. They just did it. I mean, these things, I think, you take the Clancy stuff and some of the other stuff. They wrote out a op, and then they said, well, let's do the movie first to do the priming, like you talk about, and then we'll do the real op, and everybody will be ready for it, and everyone will say it's from Zoonotic. And they tried to do that sort of with Event 201. They tried to kind of pre-program everybody, but it didn't really take. There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm reading a book right now called Beyond a Pale Horse, and it's like a critical analysis of Behold a Pale Horse, and it's interesting because the first 3/3 of the book is kind of Bill Cooper's alien stories. And then in the last third of the book, it starts off with this big disclaimer that Bill Cooper made, in which he said, all that alien stuff that I've been telling you for years, it was all a cover story for technology and things that were being developed here on the planet. It was a psyop. So it was good to kind of, you don't have to read the whole thing in order to. It's a small book, right? But as I'm kind of reconciling what you just said, I'm thinking about a movie that came out when you and I were young, and Michael Crichton actually, after he wrote this book, came to my 8th grade English class. The best teacher I ever had in school was a woman named Barbara Cooper, and she taught English. She was my 8th grade journalism teacher also. And her husband was an accountant for the accounting firm that counts the Oscars. I can't remember.
Price Waterhouse.
Price Waterhouse, right? Yeah. And so she got her husband to get Michael Crichton to come speak to my 8th grade English class, which was fantastic. And
the movie is the Andromeda Strain, I think is what
Andromeda Strain. That's what I'm going to talk about. And as I remember, he's almost as tall as you, George. Michael Crichton.
Yeah, I think he's dead now, unfortunately.
Yeah, he passed away after he wrote that his last novel was called what? What? Was it State of Fear? State of Fear. State of Fear. Yeah. Where he basically calls BS on the whole climate change movement. But in the movie Andromeda Strain, the story was that the bioweapon came from space. Right, that it was an agent that was captured by a satellite called Scoop, I believe, and it supposedly brought the alien biological agent down onto Earth, and that's what wiped out this whole town. And I can't remember whether or not the conceit at the end was that it was really the government that did it, and they were just trying to blame it on aliens, or whether or not they were trying to get the alien story going. Because at that period of time, from kind of Roswell until, Spielberg, E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that whole extraterrestrial thing was being pushed hard,
Big time. Peter, it's never Sina Bavari leaving Fort Detrick, where there's a lab leak that shuts down the lab, and him going to meet Zhengli, the Batwoman from the Wuhan lab in Africa, in Seychelles, just happened to bump into her. And then she has a breakout on September the 11th of a new novel virus, a couple of weeks later. That's never the reason. It's always extraterrestrial meteors.
Right? Those names do sound like they're out of a space movie. Sina Bavari sounds like she could be Romulan or something, right?
Yeah, it's a he, and it is Zhengli. I can't remember what her first name is, but this is why I think we had that to Matt Pottinger, the memo, right, that says we have a lab leak would go up the chain, right? So it would go to State Department attaché in Hong Kong or in Beijing, which the other previous memos did. And then it would go up to the chain to Donald Trump. What if Matt Pottinger sat on it for 90 days? Would that show malicious intent, that he wasn't going to help Trump and he wanted this thing to inflame into a big worldwide pandemic?
He was just busy, George. He had, all kinds of things he was working on,
Busy.
Vindman was playing ping pong with him, and they were in a tournament. No, I'm making that up, but we'll find out later.
Well, I'll
if
pivot.
That's true. Yeah.
I'll pivot to your story, which is the Dugin story. Not saying Kolomoisky did it, because I can't prove that. Kolomoisky saws people in half with a chainsaw.
But your first instinct was Azov, wasn't it?
Well, my first instinct was Azov, because she's the only person in the world who seemed to know Azov and her father were conducting ethnic cleansing in the Donbass the last 8 years. There seemed to be do you have to be Russian from Moscow to know that? No, I mean, but they seem like they're going after the journalists that know that. That seems to be really super rarefied knowledge. I'm really worried about Ava Bartlett right now in Ukraine, because I think this is going to start a whole new thing with Kolomoisky or somebody like that targeting journalists who tell the truth.
Well, I don't know. I was thinking that I was just trying to kind of work, do cui bono, right? Like who benefits if they actually had got Dugin. And yes, somebody in the comments said that they got his daughter, not him. Yes, they tried to get him. It was his car, apparently. And he decided at the last minute that he was going to go ride with a friend, and she jumped into his car. And that's the way that I heard the story. That could change. So that's just the latest information. But the idea is a bomb went off. They seem to be targeting him. And why would you target him? And he's an interesting cat. I read a lot about him in a book on Steve Bannon that was called, it's on the Duke Report. Trying to remember the name of that book. Because he and Bannon actually met once, I think, in Paris. And the thing that they have in common, and you see all of these kind of ridiculous labels. I no longer buy into the dialectic. People call him an extreme right wing. He's a nationalist, traditionalist Russian who believes in this kind of Eurasian supercontinent. And his idea is that in order to break American hegemony on the planet, in order to get away from this unipolar world, that Eurasia needs to unite, and Europe being on the edge doesn't even really matter that much. If you can control Russia and China and the Balkans, you basically have this super state that can call the shots in their neighborhood. And what's interesting, though, is that he did do this debate. It was an attempt at a debate with a guy named Olivero Carvalho, who's also in the Steve Bannon book. I think it's The Battle for Eternity, I think might be the name of the book. And Carvalho and him had this debate, but what was interesting in the debate is that, and I think it was in 2009, and I can bring it up. It's linked on the Duke Report. If you go to the sources section of the Duke Report, which I can show you, let me see. Dugin. But basically, what was interesting about the debate is that Carvalho was trying to disabuse Dugin of the idea that it's the United States that's actually doing it, because Carvalho had a very well-developed hypothesis about Rhodes and the Round Table and the Council on Foreign Relations and the banks and Allen Dulles and all of these people who were basically behind the scenes controlling the United States like a puppet. And so for Dugin to actually claim that it was the United States doing it and not the Anglo-American establishment, which he saw as fundamentally different from the United States, Dugin didn't seem to get that at the time. But what's interesting is, okay, so let me share this. Share screen, Brave tab. Here we go. Go to the Duke Report. So if you go to the Duke Report, on the bottom of the third column here, it says the USA and the New World Order. And if you click on index here, it will take you to this this debate. And this debate took place, August 2nd, 2011. 11 years ago. Is that right? And if I go to, I think, Olavo's reaction to his original comments, I'm looking for something that here it is, the syndicate. Yeah, see, I had highlighted this. I use this highlighting tool for web pages that James Corbett recommended. And Carvalho was explaining to Dugin that the syndicate was formed more than 100 years ago by an initiative of the Rothschilds, a multipolar family with branches in England, France, and Germany. The syndicate gathers a few hundred billionaire families for the accomplishment of their global plan. So this is basically, the thing that we talk about all the time. And most of that stuff comes from this book called The Syndicate by Nicholas Hager. And Carvalho, Dugin didn't seem to be aware of any of this stuff. Now, it's interesting, this is 2011, that, this guy supposedly has Putin's ear. Like I said, he's a nationalist, he's a Eurasianist, he's a traditionalist, meaning, he's all about, like, Russian orthodoxy and, maintaining tradition. He's anti-postmodern. He's anti-liberal in the current Western liberal version of the word liberal, where things get confusing. But what's interesting is that if I get this off the screen, stops, and then I pull up this book that was tweeted to me right before the show started. I will go to this one here, share screen, Brave tab, and it's a new book by Dugin, 2021, called The Great Awakening versus the Great Reset. And it seems that Dugin, in the 11 years since he did this this debate with Carvalho, has come around to the fact that perhaps, I don't know, I haven't read the book yet, that it's not just America. But he does still seem to operate. It says the demented usurper Joe Biden and his slavish Democrat acolytes and his slavish Democrat acolytes are opposed by the Trumpists who represent the normal America and don't want to see their country submerged in a one-world transhumanist dystopia. He's still kind of playing into the dialectic there a little bit, and I don't really like the framing of that stuff. But why am I bringing this up? The reason I'm bringing it up is because Dugin, I've seen today in the reports on him that he's reported to be a fascist. Well, a fascist is a person who thinks that the government and the military-industrial complex should work as a cohesive unit. And so that's how I would describe the current United States of America. So I don't know what people even mean when they say fascist anymore.
Well, to answer Connie's question, yes, the daughter was a journalist as well. And we did a show, I think at length, Peter, about the debate that Dugin had about this kind of new world order from the BRICS side, from the Russia-China side.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hitting the tennis ball back and forth. And the syndicate thing comes up. It reminded me of a story that Craig Murray told. Craig Murray is the guy who supposedly found the second set of WikiLeaks documents. He was a diplomat from Uzbekistan. And that one of the guys, this is the story he tells about the Pottingers. This is the Pottinger story. He said one of the guys who was a political candidate in Uzbekistan came to London, went to the city of London, went to the grand boardroom that, it's only, this is the syndicate's boardroom, right? It's
right.
What the city of London's like a mile square and whatnot. And they say, look, if you'll sign over your gold and uranium and oil and other, trace metals, we'll have an army of mercenaries for you. We'll do all the PR for you. We'll have a huge political rallies for you. We'll Antifa all the opposition parties. We'll smear the opposition candidates. It's all laid out. Just sign right here. We just need, they didn't even go for 50-50 on the gold and the silver and all the, it was a full 100%, and, the guy said at the end of it, he goes, who are you guys? Are you MI6? Are you Illuminati? He goes, no. True story. No. We're Bell Pottinger. True story. We're Bell Pottinger. We run this little thing called the City of London in here. Rothschilds come in here and sweep. Okay. Bell Pottinger is obviously very famous for running a whole bunch of overthrows in South Africa or attempting overthrows in South Africa, etc. My point is that is that a law firm or a person? It's actually a PR firm.
Okay.
But it's a PR firm that spins false narratives about the other side, like Steve Bannon, and spins false narratives about. So
they're the British version of Hill and Knowlton.
They're the British version of Steve Bannon.
Okay.
But with Rothschild money, right?
Okay.
They flip countries. Okay, with their
with their rhetoric.
You say you want a revolution, yeah. Well, you all want Bell Pottinger, right? Now that's the Beatles recorded that a long time ago, not me. They talked about Bell Pottinger. No, they didn't. I'm just kidding. But Bell Pottinger, has obviously a tremendous amount of power in this place. This is why I like not doing too complicated, get too many shuns and big words going back and forth. Just whittle it down for me like Dave Underdon does. Look, he goes, Churchill had a friend named Balfour, best friend named Balfour. Balfour had a best friend named Rothschild. He said, as long as you go flip over to coal with the Navy, over to oil, you're going to be the Secretary of the Navy. You keep doing what we want, you're going to keep going up, up, up. And I love those things because it just simplifies everything. It's down to 3 chairs in the Grand Ballroom, in the Bell Pottinger Grand Ballroom in the City of London. It's a beautiful story.
Well, it sounds like there's a whole it could be the Harry Pottinger series of books.
I said they might have done the series just as a throw. Dickens may, no, they didn't time travel. But she's a little bit of a thing, you know. Speaking of her, Rowley, she does a little bit of a time swirl with Dickens, Kipling, you know, all your favorite authors, H.G. Wells, and just takes a big stir stick. You know, of course nobody's going to be able to trace it, but you're going to be able to come out with hit after hit after hit. I love her to death.
Yeah,
but-
no. I'm just thinking about what you're saying because it's because I also you know, I read the space trilogy from G.K. Chesterton. What? C.S. Lewis. Sorry,
C.S.
C.S.
Lewis.
Lewis. And you know there's and Lewis was friends with Tolkien, right? These guys, they all hung out together, right? They all they all drank sherry or whatever it is that they did, and so there's this kind of like rich history of these things kind of laying around that you can just kind of craft these stories. But I'm always looking at the meta of it because this guy George Webb says, just look at the metadata, and it's like, why do you want to get a whole generation of children involved in black magic and wizarding, and you know, why are you trying to do that? I mean, I could put on my tinfoil hat and come up with a bunch of different reasons, but I'm sure that all of the people watching are smart enough to come up with their own reasons. But it's weird. I don't know. It's a weird thing to me.
Well, if you take going around England, and I see my good friend Peter from London in the audience, and just sitting like that with somebody who has 600 years of history at the tip of their fingers, it really is easy to time travel from, oh, we're in Woking right now, and we're talking about H.G. Wells and War of the Worlds and New World Order, and let's throw in a World Set Free just for kicks. And then, oh, you're down in Reading. Well, let's do Jane Austen. We're over here, you know, Lion, Witch in the Wardrobe and all that. So it's fun to be around people who really know.
Don't forget An Open Conspiracy and The New World Order, also written by H.G. Wells.
Yeah. And if you think about it, you take these things. I know you talk about this priming and retwisting.
It's predictive programming.
Programming.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, War of the Worlds, the Invisible Man type concept, and New World Order are what we got.
War of the Worlds. Look at how far ahead. Like War of the Worlds, 1898. I mean, it was written right around the turn of the century. It's a story about Martians, okay, who basically treat human beings like cattle, and only are stopped by a virus that winds up stopping them. But there was no, gee whiz, I'm sorry, there was no redemption. There was no kind of story arc in it. It's like for the 99% of the book, the human beings are just having their butts handed to them. And then all of a sudden the Martians die. It's not from a story structure standpoint, not great writing. But you look at a book like The Invisible Man, which was a contemporary book written by H.G. Wells, and that book is about a society, a village mostly, a town, a small town in England that was completely terrorized by something that they could not see. And the thing, again, I bring this up, is that those two stories, The Invisible Man and War of the Worlds, were in release in, I think that the War of the Worlds was a TV series that started in November of 2019, and the movie The Invisible Man came out February 2020. So the idea that these H.G. Wells stories that have been done over and over again just hit society right at the beginning of the lockdown was it blew my mind a little bit.
You know, going to Ravensburg, Klaus Schwab's hometown, I thought of H.G. Wells, A World Set Free, where I could have in my pocket, sort of the size of a flashlight or a torch, as they say in England, enough to power a city, to light a city. That's Klaus Schwab's plan. That's the plan they're not telling us.
I thought
about.
that was Nikola Tesla's plan.
Well, he wanted free energy.
Yeah.
That's not Klaus Schwab's plan. But
Right.
Klaus is building these special nozzles that can separate 235 and 238 and all that kind of stuff. And that's the plan. Hoard uranium, push the green carbon thing, and we'll only have Klaus left for, it's really a kind of an amazing series of these old classics, like you say, are really being kind of rediscovered in our contemporary terms, more so than back then.
I think they're being deployed as mind control weapons. I don't think they're being rediscovered. I think that they were purpose built.
Yeah, and a lot of this thinking you mentioned, Quigley, Carol Quigley with Tragedy and Hope, and if you want the 7-second summary, I love when it's 7-second summary. It's got a lot of assonance in that. It's a bunch of rich guys hiring a bunch of smart guys, so they'll be even richer. Boom, 1,200 pages,
right?
Just saved, and you have better comprehension than people who read it. But what I'm saying is there is some wisdom there, that these guys collected these authors you mentioned, Brave New World with Aldous Huxley and H.G. Wells, and 1984 with George Orwell, Animal Farm. Hey, sounds like Ukraine. Near the border, and they use these people. The Rhodes, who was another agent for the Rothschild banking interests, right? Use these people to craft the future because they saw the power in literature to craft the common mind.
Right, and that's when my friend Curtis Yarvin is a guy who really kind of, every once in a while he just spits something out that just kind of blows my mind. But Andrew Breitbart is famous for saying politics is downstream from culture. And I kind of got my start in this because I picked up my camera and started taking pictures of people who were saying things that I agreed with, and all of a sudden people's heads exploded and thought, how could you make that terrible person look good? And Curtis said, I think he wrote this in a blog post a year or two ago. He said, politics may be downstream from culture, but culture is downstream from power, and power is money. And so, I've told this story before, but I used to work in the producers building at Universal, where Joel Silver was down the hall. I worked in Joel Schumacher's office, and John Peters and Peter Guber were around all the time. And, Spielberg was down the road on Amblin. This is a place where they're making movies, right? And I'm in the building where the deals are being made. And then all of the people are being hired and the things are being packaged and pushed out the door to the back lot where they shoot everything. And I used to just wander around wondering, how do they decide which movie they're going to make? How do they decide that they're going to make E.T. or they're going to make Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Or how do they decide that they're going to make those movies instead of, because like I said, I was in a room that had an entire wall of scripts that had been submitted to the studio that year. And it was a wall of scripts. So I never did understand that. And I think that when you again, looking at the metadata, when you back up and you kind of look at the whole movie business in toto, you back up from it and you look at it like you're looking at Netflix tiles, right? Instead of watching the whole movie, you're just looking at the movie poster and the titles of the movies. It's like, oh yeah, there's psychological patterns going on here. There's messages that as an industry that they're trying to push out. It's kind of like watching BBC series. When I started watching Doctor Who, there's always multiracial couples, right? Like there's always kind of like the whole rainbow of cast members in every show. It's like
Star Trek, same thing.
Yeah, and somebody had mentioned Star Trek the other just in the comments here, and said Gene Roddenberry is without equal. Oh, here it is. Core says Gene Roddenberry was good, but I think Gene Roddenberry was read into a program, because if you look at what Gene Roddenberry was doing before Star Trek, he was doing kind of like bad cop shows, and then all of a sudden he does this utopian, and if you look at the meta, and this comes from this book that I'm reading right now called the Beyond a Pale Horse. if you look at Star Trek in meta, Star Trek is basically showing you what the communist Klaus Schwab utopia is going to be after we have 300 years of civil war or whatever, and genocide or whatever it takes to get there, you know. But it's like it's the happy socialism where everybody gets together, and you know there's the Prime Directive and all that other stuff. And don't get me wrong, Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan is one of my top favorite movies of all time, but I do think it's kind of a socialist propaganda show.
Well, you know, I think there's. I saw Gary Waitman say throw a dart, so he wants me to focus in on one particular topic, I think. But we do type banner around sometimes the popular literature and the older literature to see what kind of pre-programming is going on. So it's just kind of our general banter when we do that. But as far as, you know, the topics of the day, I would guess is I have, there he is, throw a dart. You know, I have a Substack that I write, and I think about that every day, and I think about it, you know, 24/7. And I think about, you know, the Trump raid. You saw me, I spent a week at Mar-a-Lago, and I'm at the trial. And so I do that all week. So when I get on the show with Peter on weekends, I think, hey, I can relax a little bit,
Yeah,
and not be so tightly bound.
but we can go through a list of all of the who would benefit from trying to blow up Dugin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could. So Gary is. That's what we put. I think that what happens is I make a headline, and then if we don't stick to it, then people. You know,
Well, and he's got a good point, because I think he was there on the Moscow River during the overthrow of.
Gary, yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
Gary.
yeah. And so that's just when they're putting in Yeltsin and getting rid of the other guy, and his partner gets murdered, and the other partner takes off with a bunch of cash on the train to Potepka. You know, it's one of those Russian spy things and they're in an international hotel, which is famous for the KGB, like lacing it, you know, top to bottom with microphones.
But Gary knows the story, so he wants us to talk about Dugin, I think.
No, yes,
Yeah.
yes. I wanted to connect the dots from Gary's story over to Dugin's story, which is this political assassination thing that's going on, and how the battlefield seems to be going outside of Ukraine for these soft targets.
Yeah, well, I would like to start with just like, because Dugin is all about geography is history. Like geography is destiny, right? That, you know, Russia is where it is and China is where it is. And we all know that Ukraine is where Ukraine is, right? And Ukraine is like, if you're playing Risk, right? What you don't see on the Risk board is all of the pipelines that are running through Ukraine, right? And Russia has all this energy, and Europe doesn't have any energy, and Ukraine is right in the middle there, right? And so by NATO coming in and creating this provocation, you can call it whatever you want. I'm not defending Putin. I don't think he's a good guy. I don't think there are any good guys in this story. Then you create this provocation, and now Europe is looking at having a very cold winter, and so they've tried poking the bear several times. NATO hasn't gone in to Ukraine yet, but they've sent in a huge amount of weapons, which I guess are, according to was it CBS? I did a story on the Duke Report a couple of days ago, says that 70% of the weapons that we're sending into Ukraine are unaccounted for. That is, we don't actually know where they went. Arming Ukraine, August 10th.
Point of order on this, because I went to Salisbury Field in Salisbury near Portendown in England in March. And you remember, or may not remember, you're probably lucky if you didn't hear me sing Salisbury Fields Forever. But that's in that Salisbury Fields Forever film, I said, you will see British soldiers, and British Navy is in the Black Sea in submarines. You will see British soldiers in the next month I interviewed somebody in Brighton who was an SAS officer who was in Ukraine.
Well, there's all kinds of advisors in Ukraine already. It's like the Vietnam War. It's like NATO's not there, so they hire a bunch of mercenaries who used to be under their command, and they send them in to train people how to use drones or how to use these advanced artillery pieces or all these other things. So they don't actually have their.
I'm saying this is the Kennedy inflection point. Whatever that memo that he wrote and said, no, I'm not going to regular army. And then they erased it when he was shot like a week later. Whatever that memo was, that's where we are right now. And maybe that's why they got rid of Boris. Right? I don't know who the two finalists, the Indian guy and the woman, I don't know who maybe Peter can tell us how the PM thing is going, but you're going to see boots on the ground, British boots on the ground within a month in Ukraine, and that is NATO.
Okay, it's August 21st, so you're saying by September 21st.
By the solstice.
Right. Well, September 11th is only like 2.5 weeks away, right? That's always a fun day. So why was I setting up the geography? I was setting up the geography because we're trying to answer the question of like who would want Dugin gone, right? So what Dugin represents is the ideological rationale for Russia invading Ukraine. I think that's a parallel construction because I don't think ideology has anything to do with it. I think it has to do with as George would say, look at the pipelines. Like if you look at the pipelines, then it explains themselves. So you can have but here's where ideological parallel constructions come in, and that is that they make great media news stories in order for example, people are talking about Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Is this the Archduke Franz Ferdinand? World War I did not start because our Archduke Franz Ferdinand got shot. He was the reason that the media spread, but those two sides, the French and the Germans and the British, they'd been arming for 4 years. They'd been, they didn't start that war with no artillery pieces. They didn't start that war with no munitions. I mean, that war was planned. That was a planned thing,
If you look at it with the interlocking diplomatic agreements in World War I and the train schedules down to the minute for mobilization, that was the most set piece war ever.
Yep.
Where we know within 20 miles either way where the front line is going to be in the east and where it's going to be in the west. And we need to get rid of the Habsburg Empire. We need to redraw it when we're done. But we need to get a whole lot of shells shot for 4 years. And then we need to spread a virus at the end to get the Americans, which happened. And isn't it interesting that in my new piece in Substack, we find that in a French maker of COVID vaccines for the U.S. military. Why doesn't that sound good? 9 whistleblowers are saying that they were mislabeled and they weren't the COVID vaccine, and they're testing different things on U.S. soldiers in Europe. So you can read about that in my Substack.
They were mislabeled.
Del Farm is in near Paris. So we're seeing the same type of shenanigans that happened at the end of World War I. Now here we go.
At the beginning of World War I.
At the end of World War I, we had the 1918 flu.
Oh, right.
And spread. But this is now, okay, we were in a hurry. Sorry, we mislabeled anthrax as coronavirus vaccine. But, hey, thanks for volunteering for the anthrax test. So this is a story that's breaking nine different whistleblowers. So we'll see. It's going through the U.S. Congress. U.S. Congress is also asking to see what is the top secret stuff that Trump had out at the Mar-a-Lago in the boxes, the secret compartment or secure communications information facility stuff. So Congress is asking, especially about the president of France. It's labeled, literally, box 2A is labeled president of France.
Right.
So there's some fun stuff in the news. But as far as the big geopolitical thing, I think Dugin is a red herring because it doesn't matter what he says. Putin didn't like the damn biolabs on his frontier.
Right.
The West is playing, and Avi Braverman, who we talked about 5 years ago, is playing for the pipelines. All Putin wants to do is see the pipelines stay open, right? And no war. He doesn't benefit.
Yeah, it's like blaming Steve Bannon for some thing because he's talking on his War Room show, and something happens that causes a country to nuke another country. It's like that doesn't happen. Like Steve Bannon, he says a lot of stuff. He's not that powerful. He'd like to be that powerful. I think he thinks he'd like to be that powerful, but I don't think.
Dugin is a kind of a corner case guy. I mean, he's a intellectual. He argues the risk board along with the other guy arguing the risk board. And what's the risk board going to look like 100 years from now?
I also think that you got to like rank people's power by like how they travel. Like when Steve Bannon showed up at Tim Pool's compound in West Virginia, he's in multiple big black SUVs with security guys and people jumping out and checking things out. Dugin is driving his own car. It's like he's not a playa, as they would say.
Well, I don't know who goes in for that Bannon crap, but anyway,
Tim Pool.
Yeah, Tim Pool must have been impressed, but I'm certainly not impressed. And come up with some juice on your show every once in a while. People might watch it. But if you just keep retreading, I think Trump is going to make a comeback, or Trump maybe already still the president. I don't know what he's saying these days, but he was a big Trump still the president guy and talking about, armed rebellion and stuff. He seems like a slaughter pen guy. He seems like he's trying to channel us into slaughter pens.
Yeah, well, you never want to be Robespierre. You never want to be Trotsky, right? You want to be Napoleon. You don't want to be Robespierre.
Right. I guess. So for Gary's benefit, we did talk about Russian geopolitics. I think this.
Well, we haven't talked about who we think could have whacked him. Okay, so we could go through the usual suspects, right? The usual suspects would. I'm sure there are people out there who would say, "Oh, it's Mossad." Okay, and then you could probably reverse engineer a reason why Mossad would line him. I could tell you that. The CIA or NATO, if they wanted to persuade us to a false flag, they could, knock off Dugin and then blow something up and blame it on the Russians being mad because Dugin got killed, right? That would be like some kind of like. Here, I should probably put up my high octane speculation because I'm just making stuff up. I know nothing about Mossad. I know nothing about the CIA. I know nothing about NATO. I'm just looking. Okay, here's an ideologue. He represents an ideological mindset that some people get bent out of shape about. I don't. I mean, I think it's. If you look at Dugin, you look at Matthew Ehret, like. Their visions for what they think is going to happen in this kind of pan-Eurasian continent alliance thing they're not different. I think that Matt Ehret is very much into the American system that balances individual liberty with general welfare, and how do you balance those two things? I think Dugin is more traditional Russian, whatever that means, but having an oligarchy probably.
I notice over and over again that if you all of a sudden, you got all your political systems going and everybody's got their, system going, and then all of a sudden you discover uranium that doesn't even need to be refined. It's so pure in Congo. Then all of a sudden people start showing up from this French medical research group called INSERM, INSERM. This guy named Yves Levy, and all of a sudden this INSERM comes down, and about 3 weeks later we have a pandemic, or at least an epidemic, and then all the workers get sick, and then they bring in Médecins Sans Frontières. And
is that Chinko Lobwe?
Chinko Lobwe, there you go. You remember Chinko Lobwe? Yeah, there you go. That's big money. So I do notice
What
that
is Chinkalobwe?
a Chinkalobwe for
Yeah.
100
Yeah.
wink. Yeah. So what I'm saying is these big systems get awfully malleable whenever they find really super high grade uranium or really super a great new virus. In this book, it talks about a new virus called NTX and NTX1. So like with all the improvements that went from SARS-1 to SARS-2. So that's what we're talking about here is you have to map onto a global, grand game strategy,
Right.
right? The reality of what's happening in the news on a day-to-day basis and who really knows who and who's really done this before and who's going to do it again.
And understand that there are practical operations and there are psychological operations, and the psychological operations manifest themselves in the media. That is, these two-dimensional screens, you're sitting there wherever you are in your house, you're looking at your phone or your computer. If an alien came down and looked over your shoulder, they'd see you looking at a piece of glass and listening with complete concentration and trying to understand what's going on. And it's kind of like your dog looking at you, like your dog, it's like this medium that that George and I are communicating to you on is fake. Okay. We're not really there. You're imagining that we're there because the pixels on the screen and the audio going into your ears make you believe that we're there and that we're having some kind of a relationship with you. And because of that, then people can do all kinds of crazy things. Like they can blow up a guy like Alexandr Dugin, and then they can come up with all kinds of reasons why that would happen. And then, it's like flying airliners into buildings and saying, oh, it must be a guy hiding in a cave in Afghanistan that did it,
Right, because that's the narrative that they, wanted to push. I start with guys who've sawed somebody in half with chainsaws.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Who's in theater? Who Putin has traded, barbs with in Ukraine, and they've gone at it. Right? And this is a person who's saying the part where I'm trying to take over the Donbass,
yeah,
is supposed to be a part of Russia. Going
Right.
back to Catherine the Great and Novorossiysk with Odessa. I don't like that. I want this person to stop. If I could get two of them in one go with a little bit of C4 and not even have to get my chainsaw out, I'm right there. Again, we identified Kolomoisky internationally sanctioned, running the Azov Brigade, running all kinds of murder operations in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, international criminal wanted in Switzerland. So I'm just saying, if I'm rounding up the usual suspects, I don't just say CIA or whatever. I'm sure intel agencies approve it and whatnot. But when you get down to who, put the C4 underneath the car, I'm guessing, somebody that speaks Russian, that can, the final guy,
right,
who put the C4 under the car is the Russian guy, right? And again, he speaks Russian, and he's done political killings, a lot of political killings in this war. So, but there's, we don't have any proof. There's a lot of other proofs. He laughs about, go ahead.
The point that I'm just trying to make is that there are practical realities. Like, if you drone strike the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of Iran in his car, you create a command and control problem for Iran, right? We did that, right? Didn't we drone strike Soleimani? What was that his name?
Soleimani.
Yeah.
At Mar-a-Lago.
Okay.
The order was Matt Pottinger was there at Mar-a-Lago with President Trump.
Okay. So
January 1st, 2020.
Okay. So when you decapitate, a military hierarchy, you have a practical effect on that military organization. Like you mess them up momentarily. You mess up their ability to respond. You mess up their ability to do all kinds of things. If you blow up an ideologue, who represents an idea. I mean, he's not, Dugin is an interesting guy, but he's not Martin Luther King. He doesn't have hundreds of millions of people quoting him. He's got the ear of a few dozen oligarchs and highly placed Russian politicians.
I think they were going after the girl because the girl is much more practical. It's sort of like David Icke is kind of in the clouds, and then Gareth Icke is.
She was
on the
in
ground.
his. The story that I heard is that he was supposed to be driving that car, and at the last minute he changed his mind. That's what I heard.
Well, and they would have got both of them, but I think her as a recruiting tool in Russia, she's a much stronger recruiting tool. She's 29. She's like, hey, grow up here, dude, and go to Ukraine and fight Ukraine for Mother Russia. To me, that is a much more effective person.
That's very interesting, and I haven't heard that point of view on any other broadcast. So she is an editor of a newspaper, and so what you're saying is that that her editorial messaging has been go fight the Ukrainians.
Yeah, and I think she had United World, and they said it was disinformation and whatnot. What's disinformation about? Hey, people should have sovereignty. That's FDR's message after World War II, and he ended up having some kind of quick thing to finish him off at the end of the World War II. That's what she was doing. He's a little bit more. Russia should be bigger than it is. Russia should be the old Russia, and the old USSR. And that's not what she was saying. Her thing was making these political bridges with the old states and reforming the old Soviet Union. I think her philosophy is a little different. It was much more dangerous.
So in a weird way, you're saying that she was the Andrew Breitbart of Russia? Was she as influential in Russia as Andrew Breitbart was in the United States?
No, I don't think that. There's not a Breitbart that comes along very often. But again, Steve Bannon comes into Breitbart, and look at how many people die at Breitbart. 3 of the top editors die at Breitbart. And then everybody else gets pushed out by Bannon. I'm not saying he killed anybody.
Wait, who else died besides Andrew?
No, there was like 3 guys. The 4 horsemen of Breitbart all died. I don't have it right in front of me. I did it in 2016, but and a whole bunch more pushed out, and a whole bunch of CIA guys brought in. Sean Moran, you may remember the Awan scandal. There might be PAC ISI. It's like
again, yeah. Well, I do. I do. Cui bono. I do know that Steve Bannon and Ben Shapiro directly benefited from Andrew's demise. I mean, I'm not making any accusation, okay? But when Andrew was gone, they, went straight to the top. Yeah. I don't think anybody knew Steve Bannon's name before Andrew passed away.
But if you look at Stan Pottinger, right, who took out Nixon, right, and he also worked for Carter. He also took out Carter. The original hostage taking was CIA and MI6, right, to take the hostages, and that made Carter look like a malaise for 444 days. But then they had Operation Eagle Claw, which was the big failure of the rescue operation, where the 2 helicopters hit each other. Mm-hmm. They had to call it off in the desert, right? Well, that was Steve Bannon, Office of Naval Intelligence, reporting directly to the Deputy Secretary of State, and Pottinger on the National Security Council. So, and again, another Kissinger thing. The rug gets pulled out from.
So that's when Bannon was at the Pentagon?
Yeah.
Because
Operation Eagle Claw.
He was the deputy to the Chief of Naval Operations.
Operation Eagle Claw. I interviewed one of the naval corpsmen that scraped guys out of one of the helicopters. Okay, so this one I got direct reporting on.
Right.
Okay, and what I'm saying is that Stan Pottinger was involved in 3 overthrows, not just one. This is be good to ask Roger on this one, because Carter with Eagle Claw, then the second one. I'm not saying anybody in the U.S. government or military did this, but somebody gave the wrong coordinates and made those 2 helicopters hit. This is like.
Well, Roger did watch our video where we talked about that. So
and Nixon
and I gave you his comment, right?
Watergate. What did he say?
Let me see if I can find it, Roger.
But I'll
He
just
said-
fit. Go ahead.
He said, "This is fascinating. Matthew Pottinger's father, Stanley Pottinger, was in the Nixon DOJ and betrayed Nixon in Watergate. True scum." That's a quote.
And he knows who did Mark Felt, who came up with Deep Throat. So actually Deep Throat is a combination of Stan Pottinger and Mark Felt at the end of the day, because one was getting DOJ. You remember, the whole thing was get Nixon's tapes, because they knew Nixon's tapes would be self-incriminating. And this whole Fourth Amendment thing that we're going through right now, we had to have 6 weeks. Remember how many trials and witnesses we had to have in order to get the Fourth Amendment on, because Nixon had executive privilege. Now with Trump, they just went right out and got it.
And it basically just ate the news cycle for 6 weeks. Like there was no, back then you had, ABC, NBC, CBS. You had you had McNeil Lehrer on PBS, right? And it was wall to wall on every television station for 6 weeks. You couldn't watch anything else.
Haldeman,
Yeah.
John Dean, Magruder, Butterfield with the tapes and everything. And that's what they avoided this time with this search warrant with Trump Mar-a-Lago. They just, it's kind of like, well, let's skip Watergate, let's skip all that Stan Pottinger stuff. I think the kids aren't as craftsman-like as their fathers. They just say, let's just do what Dad did, only I'll do it bigger. If we had 6 weeks of hearings to get to the Nixon tapes, I'll falsify a affidavit for a search warrant, and we'll just go get everything, right? So it's the same thing with the guy.
It's the same team. I don't know if you saw the Jimmy Dore. It's the lead story on the Duke Report right now. But basically, Jimmy Dore talked about what you mentioned in our last show, which was that it was the same people who ran Crossfire Hurricane who are now running who raided Mar-a-Lago. It wasn't the local Florida FBI guys. It was the counterintelligence team, who were the same people that were without Peter Strzok this time, but I'm sure he's back there in the shadows someplace. And it's all the same. It's the same characters. And one of the things that Jimmy Dore talks about in the video is that not only is it the same people that did Crossfire Hurricane, but they're under 2 different internal investigations right now. They're it's not Hubert.
It's Durham.
Durham has got that team under investigation, and the Internal Affairs Division of the FBI has that team under investigation. So you would think that if that team was under investigation by 2 different investigators, that I guess they're going for broke. They're saying, look, we either do this or we're done.
This is why I exploded after the hearing, and when I got out, I just flipped out, because first of all, Trump's people didn't present. Christina Bobb didn't present. She sat in the gallery with me, but she didn't present. How are you advocating for your client when you do that?
Well, Jimmy Dore goes over that, and there was a pretty good reason for not doing it. So you might want to watch that video. Yeah,
there's pro and con. I went and talked to FJ Farmer Jones that night, and he said, hey, it's better to hold your powder until you get indicted. And there's a flip side. Laura Ingraham ran Bob over the coals saying, hey, you might have given up by default your last chance to comment on this affidavit by not showing. So there's to and fro on this argument, but I'm just saying the initial reaction is, Judicial Watch is out there telling everybody, oh, our guy was really in there punching. Bullshit. He was a piece of wet noodle. He was milk toast. He was like, oh, yeah. The first thing I'd say is, Your Honor, this is an extraordinary event. You approved a search warrant on a sitting president or on a former president of the United States. Never happened before. Extraordinary events, a call for extraordinary transparency.
Well, Jimmy Dore says that Judicial Watch did say that they
he didn't. No, he didn't. Didn't. I was sitting in the courtroom. He was like, oh, well, I can certainly understand why you would want to protect sources and methods. Oh, I can certainly understand why you would want to protect the FBI agents' names. Oh, I can certainly understand why you would want to protect the witnesses. Unfortunately, Your Honor, you sit in our shoes. You have to do everything in our shoes. We depend on you. Please do the right thing. Please sit in our shoes. No, you get up there and you make a statement in front of all the media. This is the most egregious use of the violation of the Fourth Amendment ever in our history. Okay, Your Honor, that's your first line.
Okay,
and
so
now we have to figure out a way for you to right that wrong. That's where we have to start going. I'm a Judicial Watch guy, right?
I know you are. So here's my point.
Yeah.
It's not very long. It's like the whole video is 17 minutes long. It's the top story on the Duke Report. Do me a favor and go look at it. And if Jimmy Dore is reading stuff, okay, he wasn't there. He's going on things that he's reading. So if people are feeding Jimmy Dore bullshit, or if people are bullshitting and Jimmy Dore is reading their bullshit, it would be good to know that.
Well, people should get the transcript, right?
Yeah.
Not some, I was Superman, when I walked down the street yesterday, and not Clark Kent. So I came out swinging, right? And
right.
The other people came in line. You could see that the whole thing was turning. Like Trump's like, wait, we should have been swinging. Bob was saying we should have been swinging. Everybody's, Ingram saying we should have been swinging. JW is saying we should have been swinging. Now they're going to come out swinging tomorrow. Trustee, the lawyer for Trump, is going to file. Farmer Jones and I that night, we said, hey, malicious intent, misconduct, FBI misconduct. Why not file immediately? And they are going to do that tomorrow. Hopefully, Trustee is going to do that. But in this kind of game, Judicial Watch doesn't have anything to lose. So get it on record. Don't be milquetoast.
Right.
If they put you in jail for a year, so what? You were the guy who said this is the most egregious thing that ever happened in the history of our country in terms of judicial misconduct.
Well, I'm going to go and I'm going to watch the video again too,
Yeah.
because it might have been somebody else. It might have been one of the other outlets, but as I remember it, I thought he was talking about Judicial Watch. So.
Well, I'll just say really quickly, there's 5 outlets, 5 lawyers, MSM all the way, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS, Palm Beach Recorder, all these people. They were all friends of the judge. And it was all a birthday party. It was like an 8-year-old's birthday party where you have your favorite magician and your favorite show pony and your favorite, person to tell jokes or whatever, and your favorite music. It's like a little wedding that they had. And I was the one who got to spoil the party and said, you're all screwed up because that was the worst thing that ever happened in our judicial system, So hopefully we'll come out swinging tomorrow.
You're the kid at the magic show who knows how all the tricks are done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Look up his sleeve. But Peter, let me just go to one thing. Speaking of looking up their sleeve, I went to Galveston last year. I went to the University of Texas medical branch. That's who Matt Pottinger cites on his thing to help him write the SARS and SARS-2 book, right? Last Nazi.
Yeah, because that's good metadata.
That's good
right?
metadata.
Who's blurbing the book?
Blurbing the book? And we talked, and Mark Kulak talked about this. There's a guy named Peter Jarling and a guy named Sina Bavari, and they did anthrax. Remember the anthrax scare?
Sure.
Right? Remember the postal workers died, and remember the reporter died from the
scientist committed suicide. Yeah.
And then they sent a weak version, non-lethal version, to Congress, to Daschle and Leahy, and then we had all kinds of bioterrorism things that went into effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was that. Okay, that was a combination of 2 entities: Fort Detrick, Sina Bavari, and a guy named Jarling, and the University of Texas branch. Well, guess who's also at Wuhan on September 11th when they have some kind of event? Somebody from the University of Texas medical branch again. And guess who works there? Jordan Jarling. But this time they make up a fake person, so it doesn't obviously connect to Sina Bavari, again, the same guy up at Fort Detrick who has a lab leak at that same time. They come up with this Virginia Benassi. So my fundamental theorem here is, I know there's a State Department, something sent to the State Department say we've got a lab leak.
Right.
Okay. I don't know who wrote it, but I know it's a Benassi. I'll just tell you that right now. I know it's a Benassi that wrote that September 11th thing. And I think it only went to one person. Matt Pottinger. And he sat on it for 90 days. We'll see if I'm right. We'll see if I'm right. But think about it. That allows me to throw all the things into motion that I need for mRNA. 1 week later, Trump signs the mRNA bill. They called it flu executive order for making flu vaccinations faster.
Right.
But it was really mRNA. But a week later, after they get that new novel virus, something new has broken out in Wuhan, Trump signs that bill and they throw that into motion. But they don't want to give Trump the idea that there's a pandemic coming, because he could shut down the travel. He could put a lid on the coronavirus. And so they let it go a whole 90 days, more than 90 days, until Chinese New Year's over. Then the 2 days after Chinese New Year's, all of a sudden Matt Pottinger's in there saying, this is the 1918 flu. Matt, you give me whiplash, dude. I go from nothing, you don't say anything to me for 120 days, and now you're in here telling me it's the 1918 flu. So those are the kind of things that we need to bring forward and just go, hey, does this make sense or does this not make sense? And let's ask some questions. Would Trump keep that memo? If Trump knew that there was a Benassi memo written by some Benassi from NATO to the State Department saying there's a lab leak to trigger the mRNA, remember who writes the document to get bids for mRNA vaccines? Virginia Benassi, right? Wellcome Trust and for the WHO. She's the one who writes the predictive document with who? Sina Bavari, to get mRNA. Who would be the most benefited, right, by getting somebody, by sending an email to somebody to throw the mRNA mechanics into motion? Virginia Benassi. It's going to be the Benassi memo. There's 4 whistleblowers, just letting you know right now, Matt, 4 whistleblowers. Okay. I don't know. They might have killed a couple of them, but there's 4. It's coming. The lab leak memo, September 11th, is coming. And I think Trump kept a copy.
And is the lab leak, and Peter, because Peter goes to the next level, is the lab leak memo just a parallel construction?
Well, I think when you say Trump blew it, this is what they're trying to say. Trump reacted too slow to coronavirus. Well, why did you hide it from me, Matt? Why'd you hide the Benassi memo from me for 90 days or 120 days? Or if Trump overreacted, then you say, well, of course I overreacted. You were the guy who was suppressing this email. We know Matt Pottinger. Well, we don't know, but I am betting 95% confidence that Matt Pottinger is throw it high. You can go ahead and throw it on there. Put it this way, Peter. It has to be somebody at Mar-a-Lago. It has to be somebody on the National Security Council. He didn't bring the whole White House staff down to Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
So at least people, when you speculate against me, speculate with people who are on the National Security Council dealing with national security issues. People are saying Jared Kushner, and they're saying Ivanka, and they're saying all these other people who are at Mar-a-Lago, but they're not involved in the national. They don't have clearances. Right. So they don't have Q-level clearances, so they're not involved in these discussions. So I think when we get to what was Matt Pottinger hiding, right, and why did he want to falsify a affidavit to get a raid? What was he trying to get? I think he was only trying to get one piece of paper, the Benassi memo, the lab leak memo, because it shows that he held
and that's so that he can slap and seal it.
Slap and seal.
Yeah.
Slap and seal. And
so just to explain to everybody that Trump went, according to Kash Patel, who we have all kinds of questions about anyway, according to Kash Patel, that Trump had declassified a bunch of documents as he was leaving the White House, and that the National Archives was dragging their feet to on declassifying them. According to Kash Patel, the president has the power to declassify those things, and the bureaucracy can't override him. But they were slow walking all of this stuff, and that by the FBI raiding and then taking those documents back under counterintelligence, then for reasons of national security, they could take the documents that he unclassified and then put a court seal on them, which would have the same effect as classifying them. It would make them unavailable to the public to ever look at, discuss, or comment on. Is that, do I have that correct? Wait, you're muted, George.
Yes. And I saw somebody saying Dr. Cottrell went quiet. I think he's doing finals. And I think Tommy, they said he's gone quiet. Tommy's just taking a week off.
Dr. Cottrell and I did a show a couple weeks ago, and we were supposed to get back together a couple of days later, and he pinged me back and said he's just underwater with exams, and he would let me know when he was out from under the water.
Yeah, so the speculation, I think it should be like there should be like baseball. You should have to keep within the foul lines. You know, if you should have to hit the ball in fair territory, meaning you should have to take a legitimate person who was the pitch was at Mar-a-Lago and somebody who was there with Trump who would have something that would be classified, secret, and top secret. Mm-hmm. Those are the three levels. You have to have all three of those levels. Now, Jared Kushner did have a clearance for a while, but then he got pushed out. So Jim Jordan says the same thing. It had to be somebody who was there at the top levels with Trump from beginning to end. The only person that fits that bill is Pottinger, because he started with Flynn brought him in day one, and he went out on January 6th.
Right.
Went on January 6th. So, this Brian Auten, mm-hmm. They don't want to show, for instance, here's just one example of Judicial Watch. Your Honor, there's a FBI agent that's under OPR investigation right now in one investigation and is under questionable misconduct in the Durham investigation. I think we should be able to see that name if that person was involved in the raid. We should see if anybody is under investigation that was a part of the raid. We should be able to. Can we all agree on that? Right? If I was under investigation for larceny
and
or robbery,
and what happened?
Well, they didn't say that. They didn't say that.
They didn't say that.
Yeah, he just said, "Oh no, I agree that we shouldn't expose any of the FBI agents' names." Well, yes, we should. If there was malfeasance and misconduct, if there's a malfeasance and misconduct, sure as hell we should expose their names. We should be putting it on a marquee somewhere. That's just one example. The same thing with witnesses. If a witness has ill intent, if a witness can be shown to be defrauding the president or trying to be a part of some political motivation, like the Steele dossier, of course we should be able to see who said it, right? We went through this whole thing with the Steele dossier where source A, source B, source C, source D, forever, like a year and a half before they finally said who those people were. And then it all turned out to be a fake, phony thing. This group has turned out fake, phony things like there's a new market for fake, phony things. They did the Mueller report. They did Crossfire Hurricane, impeachment 1, impeachment 2, January 6th, coronavirus. I mean, how many more misconducts do they get before we call a penalty, Your Honor? I mean, just advocacy is, I guess, all I'm asking for. Judicial Watch, God love you, but you got to put a stronger player in there.
All right. Well, it would be great, George, if you took a look at the Jimmy Dore video, and
we'll do.
Maybe we could do a George Webb reacts video to Jimmy Dore, because I don't think Jimmy Dore is lying. I think Jimmy Dore is reading things that may not be what actually happened. So it'll be interesting to go look at that. So what do you? So I had two thoughts, and then we can wrap this up. One was Scott Adams says that a lot of times it's instead of looking for a right or wrong or this person did it or that person did it kind of assessment, that it's better to do percentages, right? And we're talking about when managers are playing baseball, right? They're looking at the percentages of the pitchers that are throwing pitches and the batting averages of the batters, and there's all kinds of stat junkies, right, in baseball, and it just seems to me that what you're doing is that you're using that kind of statistical analysis part of your rationale to try to kind of just narrow the field down to, well, I think he's going to be throwing high and away. Okay. And high and away is Matt Pottinger, right? Is that,
Well,
am I mixing, as I'm mixing, I should have maybe I should have used basketball percentages.
No,
Then,
I think there's some constraints, what I would call a constraint.
yeah.
When we did systems of equations, it was a constraint. It was like, okay, the field shall be 90 degrees. It's not going to change for any baseball game, right?
Right.
And it can be different outfields and whatnot, but the bases shall be 90 feet apart, that type of thing. And you have to have somebody on the mound. If you're going to propose somebody as the informant, he's got to be on the mound. You can't say Whitey Ford pitched a no-hitter last week for the Yankees.
Right.
Right? Because Whitey Ford's dead. Okay. Right. You can say, I think Jose Canseco pitched because he's at least alive, but it would be better to start with people who actually are on the pitching staff of the Yankees who have pitched in the last 4 years.
Sure. Yeah.
Just as a throw that out there.
Yeah.
And then you have to have something that Trump connected with. You could have all sorts of things coming across the China desk, at the Mandarin Lounge when you're trying to, shuffle in shipments for the Harding Matheson Bank. I understand that keeps Matt real busy, but it has to be then something that you interacted with Trump on. That's the hitting part of this.
Right.
And if there wasn't bat to ball between the two of them, then don't forward it. And it has to be classified. So it can't be Little League where they are throwing batting practice, whatever. It has to be the big leagues. It has to be secret or top secret. Okay. Top secret is a very small group of people.
Right.
Right. It's a very small group. So it might not be just Pottinger. Navarro may have had a secret clearance. I don't think Peter Navarro had a top secret clearance, but there's very few. Now, some of his generals early on, this is where people are throwing out the generals. Kelly early on, McMaster early on, Milley early on, Mattis early on, had the McInerney. They had high-level clearances, Flynn, etc., but they all went away.
Right.
They all went away. When coronavirus rolled around, it was Matt Pottinger and Peter Navarro. So just throwing it out there. But that's the game, rules of the game I'm trying to get people to play. And then people are saying Ivanka or Ivana, the one who just died, falling down.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. Again, yeah. Somebody said that I saw a rumor that someone said that someone gave Ivana the book on Donald and she was using it against him or something, and then she got whacked, and I was just going, oh, come on, really. But it's so salacious. So let's taking that same analogy. I don't know who killed Dugin's daughter. I don't know if they were trying to kill Dugin or his daughter, but the hypothesis that she's a very influential journalist, okay, makes a lot of sense to me. And so at that point, you can kind of back in the cui bono, like who would want to get rid of her to do that, right? And, my guess would be NATO. I don't know. But I'd have to go and look at all of the different players and try to, back in a hypothesis on that one. But
with Kolomoisky, I can actually show him leading a raid of a bunch of Azov guys on a gas company in Kiev in the middle of the night, stormtroop, right out of, like Himmler blowing the whistle for the Gestapo.
But Kolomoisky and NATO are kind of two hands of the same beast.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
At that point,
whoever,
point, it doesn't matter. Was it Lee Harvey Oswald or somebody else? It doesn't matter. The guy's dead, right?
Right. Somebody said Pierre Bonassi at UTMB. If you go back to a year ago when I was screaming at the windows at UTMB, I was screaming for Jordan Jarling, who was the son of Peter Jarling, who did the anthrax hoax. And I said, well, one lockdown deserves another. How many people have caused a worldwide or a U.S.-wide lockdown, right? Peter Jarling, so why not again with Jordan the son? Does Stan Pottinger know anybody at UTMB? I think he does. So I will check out the Jordan, the Pierre Benassi at UTMB. What does this say, Peter?
It says, spread this video on well-watched MSM YouTube channels. Start discussions in the comments and then link to this. Start now. That is the way that you can help directly. Just do it. Rupert.
Great advice.
Great advice. Like
that's the way it's done.
Yeah, that is the way that it's done. Yeah, like, subscribe. If we can get over 1,000 subscribers on the Duke Report YouTube channel, then when George tweets it out, there'll be a thumbnail on the bottom. It'll make the tweets prettier. So, and then I don't want to leave the comment up because, George, how do people keep this front line leading edge? Somebody said that they were having problems. Somebody bought me 10 coffees this week, and I'm supposed to give you 5 because they couldn't figure out how to get the Venmo to work. So I owe you 5 coffees, George.
Okay. Well, okay. I might come out there and pick them up. Okay. Well, the please do support. I got hit earlier today, and I won't say from where, but saying, hey, you wasted all this money at Neighborhood News developing all these journalists. All $47,000 from that the books generated went to Neighborhood News. Now, that could have been wasted, but all I'm saying is the $47,000 went to people printing books, learning all about ink, shipping, coming up with new products, revenue coming in the door, paying the rent, paying people who live there. So, we do as best as we can. And so if people are out there saying, they stole the server, Peter. They took the server with the 4,200 videos I gave them and the 42 booklets I gave them. And somebody literally took the server and that took them out. I was here in Atlanta, so I didn't do anything, untoward. So don't penalize me if I gave all my money to Neighborhood News because I wanted to do citizen journalism. Buy me a coffee now that I gave all my money away is what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Connie is saying, are these Peter Duke Report and George Webb videos on the Duke Report? Yes. There is a link, YouTube channel at the top. And if you click on the YouTube channel, it will take you to the YouTube channel, this Duke Report YouTube channel. I'm also, this is simultaneously going out on the Reality OS. It's going out on Twitch. It's going out on Odyssey. It's going out on other ones. I don't know them all. Twitter. It's going out on Twitter. I try to put them out in as many different places as possible. And, if George and I had a big operation going, then maybe we'd be more organized. But really at this point, it's me, producer Carrie, and George. And that's how this thing is happening. And we use technology called StreamYard. And I try to figure out what George wants to talk about before the show, but sometimes I guess incorrectly. So if people didn't think that we got into Dugin fast enough, I apologize.
Yeah, and then you can also, with YouTube, you can create a timestamp by just, saying 32:22. And
actually, if you go on YouTube page, when you click the share button, there's a little checkbox that says start this video at this time.
Oh, it's even easier now. Yeah.
So you just scroll the video to the point where you want somebody to pay attention to it. You click the little checkbox, and then the share link that you get will start the video right where you want them to watch it.
So if you were mad, and Gary, I'm sorry, I didn't get to the Yeltsin on the tank with the bullhorn. Sorry I didn't get to that until 20 minutes in. But we do try to cover a lot of ground. And Peter's, could you just show the Duke Report and just show Gary how many different sources we're trying to cover and how many people we're trying to keep up with? So different people come to the show for different reasons. And so that's why we want to try to hit on all the when we throw a dart, we want to throw a lot of darts to make sure we cover the board in darts.
Yeah, and basically what we're doing, I mean, the reason that the Duke Report exists is because there are so many sources right now that have been marginalized or kicked off of social media. So here's the Jimmy Dore video right here. And a lot of people, like I'm going to be on my friend Michael Parker's show tomorrow. I make Michael Parker tell me which stories on the Duke Report do you want me to talk about, because I can't read all of these stories every day. Like there are a lot of people who have been kicked off of the internet. And so Carrie and I spend a couple of hours a day. A U.S. amphibious assault ship arrives in Lithuania. Oh, that's interesting. So we do our best to try to figure out what we think are the most important story, or certainly something that would get people interested in it. And then we put that up at the top here. But that's the only part of this website that is edited. The rest of this website these are RSS feeds that are aggregating. It's a feed aggregator. So if you want to get away from editors, people that are pushing news at you, and you want to go look at a bunch of sources where people are writing independent, evidence-based journalism, that's what the Duke Report is. That's what it's there for. And I do these videos with George basically to get people to go to the Duke Report. So, and what's the most important thing that you could do on the Duke Report? Bookmark it. So at the top of your web browser, there are these things that they were big in the 90s. Before social media networks, they were called bookmarks. And if you bookmark the Duke Report, okay, then you have a home page. This is another relic from the 90s. But instead of having social media sites using algorithms to push news at you, use the Duke Report to aggregate news from independent sources. And you might have to scroll a little bit in order to find a story that's interesting, but you're going to find things on the Duke Report that you're not going to find on Facebook because they're blown off of Facebook. They're not going to be on Twitter because they're blown off of Twitter. And that's the end of my speech, but you wanted me to show you the sources. So if you go to the sources on the Duke Report, so I have it broken down. There's investigative journalism. These are all of the people that we pull feeds from. We've got current events. We've got commentary. And then for people that want to roll their own, as it were, if you want to use a feed reader, which is another way to aggregate RSS feeds, let's say that there's only 10 things on the Duke Report that you really want. This is something that I'd like to build. If I was generating enough revenue, I would be able to build it. I'm not there yet. But you can take the RSS feeds that are on the right side here, and this is basically the sources for all of the news that are on the Duke Report. Now, they're not pretty to look at. Like if I click on Neil Oliver right here, you will see that you're getting an XML file. That's not a very pretty thing, but if you know how to use a feed reader, you can tailor the news so that you just get the news sources that you want. This is a way that I can expose all of these people on the right on one page right here. And I know it's a lot to bite off, and I know it's hard to read for some people, and I know it requires reading because a lot of people just like to watch videos like they're watching right now. But those are the sources. There's books. I recommend books. Deep Hop Biosphere has been getting a lot of clicks. This is a book by a guy named Thomas Gold, who doesn't think that oil comes from dinosaurs. He thinks that it's something that the Earth makes. A lot of people have been clicking on that. There's a link here to the T-shirt store. We've got some new shirts this week. I don't know if anybody saw the meme that I did. Let me see. I did a meme this week. I don't know where it is. Well, anyway, if you saw the Joe Biden Banana Republic meme, that was my crew. So a couple of guys had the idea, but they didn't know how to do the type. I think it's a pinned tweet on Peter Duke's Twitter. So if I go to Twitter, And then I go to my profile. Ding, 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 ding. And apparently Dan Scavino and Donald Trump Jr. tweeted this out. America, take 50% off your entire net worth. Banana Republic.
That's good, Peter.
It was pretty good.
You just can't beat the pros. That's good stuff.
Exactly. So my buddies came up with the idea that I do memes with, and but they didn't know how to make it look exactly like it was a Banana Republic ad. But I put it out there. I didn't put my name on it. Dan Scavino. Go to Dan Scavino's Twitter and let him know that Peter Duke did this, because he thinks somebody else did it. Why was I bringing that up? I was bringing that up because we have a T-shirt in the store, which is this Banana Republic T-shirt, and it's interesting because usually these people don't let me put up like trademarked things, but it's Banana Republic on an upside down American flag. So if you wanna be fashionable and tell everybody what you think of the Banana Republic that we live in, there it is, right there in the Duke Report.
Very cool. Well, Peter, thank you very much, and I can't wait to do it. Can't wait to do it on Tuesday, right? Tuesday at 5.
Tuesday.
Tuesday
Right.
at 5. Let's do it then.
All right. We'll see you then, George. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Talk to you later.